Guess what time it is, boys and girls? It's social studies time. Hey, hope you're doing good. Last time we talked about social studies was like a couple weeks ago, and we last left off talking about how the Constitution was all finished up. And so now the colonists have a country, and more importantly, they have a country that that has laws. And so that's what's really important to them now, because now they believe that they can sustain themselves as an actual country. And if you look at this map here, you can see that this part here, this green part of this map, is what the United States now is, now that they have passed the Constitution. Okay? What we're going to talk a little bit about today, as you can see from the map, is this thing called the Louisiana Purchase. What is the Louisiana Purchase? Well, it's this big, huge, kind of pink and purple mass of land that became the next piece of land that the United States sought to get, for the reason that they really wanted their country to get bigger. This idea and philosophy came to mind that, why just stop here at the Mississippi River now? We can go further and further into the west and make this whole continent become our country. You can see that during this time that there are other states being formed, and you can see that some of those shapes of those states are different than what they are now. Well, why is that? Well, that's because states are still technically not totally established and not totally being formed. You can see the Indiana Territory, which actually makes up Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana and Illinois. You can see down to the south, there are some territories that aren't formed. Well, this purple territory, or pinkish territory here, is what's known in 1803 as the Louisiana Purchase. And it is not owned by the United States. It is owned by another country. For a long time, it was owned by Spain, but Spain sold it to France. And France was hoping to use it to kind of do what the United States is doing, is trying to establish presence in North America, in the New World. But at the time, it's 1803, the president of the United States then is Thomas Jefferson. You all remember Thomas Jefferson from the Constitutional era, where he wrote, or even the American Revolution, where he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Well, now Thomas Jefferson is a much older man, and he has become the president of the United States. And he loves this idea of the United States getting more land and becoming bigger. Mostly because most of the merchants and farmers in the United States, they rely on the Mississippi River to get to the Gulf of Mexico and to ship their goods back to Europe. But the problem is that since this is owned by France and other territories, it's hard to get down the river with your goods without having to pay some sort of tax. And so Thomas Jefferson thinks, boy, if we can get this piece of land, we can not only make the United States bigger, but we can have free access to getting the products that we make out to the Gulf of Mexico and to other countries where it will help the economy of the country. And so he really wants this piece of land, but the problem with it is, it's owned by another country. Well, good news in that department. And I'll show you why in a second here. Right here on my computer, you can see these two men. There is Thomas Jefferson. He is the President of the United States. And then you see this man. This man is the ruler of France. He's sort of a military ruler, and his name is Napoleon. His last name is Bonaparte. Yeah, it sounds like a funny name, I know. But his name is Napoleon Bonaparte, and he is the ruler of France. And in 1803, Napoleon has really hoped to get some land in the United States and start setting up colonies. But France hasn't been able to do that. And he's got another problem. He is in the middle of a war with England. And his army desperately needs money. And so he decides that he's going to give up on this idea of having land in the North American continent, and he's going to sell the piece of land to Thomas Jefferson for a certain amount of money. And he offers to sell the whole Louisiana Purchase amount of land to Thomas Jefferson for about $15 million. And Thomas Jefferson loves the idea. So he takes him up on the offer, and he buys the land. And so you now have a really good idea of, why it's called the Louisiana Purchase. Up to this point, whenever America gets a piece of land, well, what happens? Well, it's fought for, right? There's a battle that has to occur, or there's a military conflict. Well, not this piece of land. This piece of land was purchased. And so it was bought for $15 million. Yes, that sounds like a lot of money, but it was really kind of a deal. Look at all of the land that they were getting for $15 million. And the land had a lot of things in it. What kind of things that it actually had? Well, nobody really knew for sure. And certainly not Thomas Jefferson. Was the land going to be full of wild animals? Was the land going to be able to be farmed? Was the land going to be flat? What was it going to be like, and what was on there? And so he needed to figure that out. And what he decides to do is he decides to hire two men to go and check out the land, to go and explore the land, find out what's there, okay? And so he hires these two men. He hires Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, okay? And here is Meriwether Lewis right here. That's him. And this is page 387 of your social studies book. And then, okay, here is William Clark. And so they form what they call the Corps of Discovery. And they decide to just go start exploring the land of the Louisiana Purchase. Their job is to come back and tell President Thomas Jefferson what's on the land, what's out there, and you can imagine the kinds of things they're going to find. Number one, they're going to find a whole lot of Indian tribes, aren't they? We've been talking about that all year as we watch the growth of the United States expand over history. We cannot forget about the Indians and the fact that they're there. And really, they've been there before anybody else. But so what they end up doing is they end up exploring that land and checking it out. And they take notes. They draw pictures. They record the things that they see. And all the while, they are moving right in this direction. And Thomas Jefferson's kind of given them another role, too. See if you can make it. See if you can make it all the way to the Pacific Ocean, okay? And so basically what they're doing is they are following along the Missouri River. They are following along the Missouri River to see if they can make it to the Pacific Ocean. And they do. they achieved that, but it wasn't easy. Remember, there are no roads or airplanes or cars back then. They are literally just exploring this land by walking, by canoeing down rivers, by whatever methods and means of transportation that they can find. And it gets pretty ugly and hairy for them for a while. I mean, they get hungry. They get rained on. It's pretty treacherous. And at one point, it gets so treacherous, you know, they get lost and they're in a lot of danger and a lot of trouble. And they credit Indian tribes for helping them explore through this territory and through this land. One of the most influential parts of this trip that they take through the Louisiana Purchase is the friendship that they established with a very famous Native American guide, and her name was Sacagawea. She shows Lewis and Clark a lot about the land. She shows them the directions that they need to go to discover certain parts of the land, and that's why in this picture in this book you see them in a boat, probably along the Missouri River, and they're talking with a lot of the Native American tribes that are in that picture. Okay, and so the Louisiana Purchase is a very, very important event in American history, and now I'm going to tell you why that is. The Louisiana Purchase, it turns out to be just one little thing that is at the very beginning of this thing in American history known as the westward movement. This idea that the United States is going to grow and it's going to move from east to west. And so you can see that the purchase of Louisiana is part of the westward movement. The United States is now growing and moving to the west. And probably within the next 20 years or so, after 1803, all the people living in the United States, they're gonna fall in love with this idea of what they call manifest destiny. Manifest destiny just means this idea of this dream that this whole continent will become the United States, and it will go from East Coast to West Coast. And so the idea of the United States encompassing the whole North American continent kind of becomes adopted during the westward movement. There are many, many events in the westward movement, and we're going to talk a lot about them in the coming days and in the coming weeks. But the Louisiana Purchase kind of starts it all. The Louisiana Purchase starts the whole westward movement. And if you have some time, listen to this video again, pause it, and just stare at this map a little bit. I think it's just really interesting how you can follow over time how the United States actually grows and expands, how the little pieces of states come together, how they actually form, okay? And so I'm gonna finish up this video now, but a quick review is this right here on this board, okay? The Louisiana Purchase, right? It is part of the westward movement. It happens in 1803, and the westward movement actually lasts from 1803 to 1855. A lot of people who study history could debate that it actually goes further than 1855. And the key points of the Louisiana Purchase, don't forget these. These are really important. One, Thomas Jefferson was the president at the time. He was the third president of the United States, okay? He purchased the Louisiana land, the Louisiana territory, from the French ruler Napoleon for $15 million, okay? And he hired Lewis and Clark to explore the land before settling it, okay? And a couple other things that I didn't mention.
or maybe I mentioned one of them actually, is one Sacagawea, the Indian, helped guide them. And you can see here it says Pike. Well, someone else actually explores the Louisiana Purchase land too, and his name is Zebulon Pike. And Zebulon Pike goes in a different direction of Lewis and Clark. He actually goes to the south. And you may know of this monument in the United States in the Rocky Mountains called Pikes Peak. Well, Pikes Peak is named after Zebulon Pike, who actually explored the Louisiana Purchase around the same time as Lewis and Clark. And so hopefully this video helps. It gives us a start to the idea of the westward movement. And we're going to be talking more about all of the events. There are many, many of them. There's about 25 or 30 significant events that occur in the westward movement in the next couple of weeks. And so all I really wanted you to do today is to watch this video and maybe rewatch it again and just hear the story of, what happens after the Constitution is signed and established. Well, now the United States is moving forward with this idea of expanding across the North American continent. All right. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you will keep learning the social studies. Bye.